Very good evening, aspirants. Welcome to the Hindu News Analysis by Shankar IAS Academy for the date 18th June 2020. These are the list of news articles chosen for today's analysis. It has been provided along with the page numbers of different editions of Hindu newspaper. The link for the handwritten notes in PDF format and the timestamping for the displayed articles is given in the description box and also in the comment section. Let's move on to the first news article analysis for today. This discussion is based on this news article which talks about the recent tensions between North Korea and South Korea. After a long time, the tensions between North and South Korea has resurfaced. Over the last few years, we witnessed that North and South Korea has been coming together for peace talks. But now things have overturned in the last few weeks. And the reason mentioned for the recent tensions is that the North Korean defectors in the South Korea are sending propaganda over the border against North Korea. See, generally, North Korean defectors are the Koreans who have fled North Korea seeking asylum in South Korea or in other nations. So it is said that now they are sending propaganda against the current regime of North Korea. So this has escalated the tensions between both the countries. So in this context, let us discuss in brief about the history of North Korea and South Korea. The syllabus that is relevant to this discussion is given here for your reference. See, first, know that Korea was under Japanese rule since 1910. But when Japan lost the World War II in 1945, there were two groups claiming Korea. One group was communist revolutionaries who were supported by the then USSR, and their leader was Kim Il-sung. He later became the founder of North Korea. Then the other group was inspired by the Western science and industrialism. They were led by another leader, Syngman Rhee. He later became the first president of South Korea. But after the defeat of Japan, in order to disarm the Japanese army and to repatriate Japanese population in Korea to Japan, US and USSR agreed for a temporary division of Korea. See, as you know, repatriation means sending back to their own country. So to disarm the Japanese army and to send back the Japanese population who were staying in Korea to back to their own country of Japan, US and USSR agreed for this temporary division. So based on this, in 1945, they agreed to divide Korea at the 38th parallel or the 38 degree north latitude. But due to ideological differences that prevailed at that time, they could not devise a plan for unification of divided Korea. So later in the year 1948, the Republic of Korea or the present day South Korea was established under Syngman Rhee. But in 1950, the North Korean army, which was supported by USSR, attacked South Korea. And this marked the beginning of Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953. See, the Korean War is a classic example of Cold War politics, where US supported South Korea and USSR supported North Korea. So later in 1953, an armistice agreement was signed between North Korea and South Korea at Panmunjom. See, armistice agreement is an agreement which is made by opposing sides in a war to stop fighting for a certain time. We can say it is an agreement of truce. And this agreement was signed at Panmunjom. And remember, Panmunjom is part of demilitarized zone, or in short DMZ. See, this DMZ is a buffer zone between North Korea and South Korea, and it runs along the 38th parallel as you can see in this map. So ever since the agreement was signed, the two Koreas remained separated till date. So now North Korea is under a communist regime which is supported by China and Russia, and it is said that the country did not develop much. Well, if you see South Korea, it is influenced by the Western ideal, and it is one of the most developed democracies across the world. You would even remember the peace talks between the US President Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, who is the current supreme leader of North Korea, and these peace talks happened in 2018 and 2019. So everyone was hoping that as a result of these peace talks, the Korean peninsula will be peaceful. And even in 2018, the two Koreas signed a military peace agreement. This was supposed to diffuse the tensions in Korean boundary and also to make way for reconciliation, also for further demilitarization of the buffer zones and to initiate cultural exchanges. And based on this agreement, an inter-Korean liaison office was set up for further communications, and its headquarters was set up in North Korea. But all these easing of tensions and achievements could be overturned due to the present day escalations between the countries. So what is the current scenario? According to today's news article, it is said that North Korea defectors were conducting anti-regime propaganda over the border, as we already saw. So North Korea blamed the escalations on South Korea's inability to prevent the defectors from flying this anti-regime propaganda over the border. As a result of this, South Korea offered to send special envoys to ease the escalating tensions. over the defiance or resistance by North Korean defectors. But North Korea rejected this offer, and it has even vowed to redeploy troops to the border areas. And recently, North Korea even demolished the liaison office, which was set up under the 2018 agreement. So this is the current tensions between North Korea and South Korea. So we can conclude by saying that the present escalation in the Korean border will not be good for the people of both Koreas. This can also hamper the ongoing US-North Korea talks on denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. If the escalating tensions results into a war, then other superpowers like USA, China, and Russia will also take sides. And that can result into a catastrophe. So such kind of catastrophe should be avoided at any cost. So we can suggest that the United Nations and other stakeholders like the US and China must play a proactive role to resolve the building tensions between both the Koreas. Because already there is escalating tensions between India and China, US and China. And now if countries take sides based on North Korea and South Korea, then it could lead to another world war. So that is all about this discussion. In this discussion, we saw the history of North and South Korea's relations, and we also saw the reason for the current tensions between the countries. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. The repeat practice question will be discussed in the last session. Now, this next discussion is based on this news article, which mentions about the direction issued by the High Court of Karnataka to the State Election Commission of Karnataka. The High Court has directed the State Election Commission to reconsider its decision to put off or postpone the Gram Panchayat elections. So, in this context, we'll discuss in brief about the news, the relevant constitutional provisions, and the mandate of State Election Commission, etc. The syllabus that is relevant to this discussion is given here for your reference. So, you know that on May 28th of 2020, that is last month, the State Election Commission or SEC of Karnataka decided to postpone the elections to Gram Panchayats. And the reason stated for this decision is that it will be difficult to conduct the elections due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So the notification of the SEC was challenged in the High Court of Karnataka, where the petitioners questioned the constitutional validity of the notification issued by the SEC. So after hearing the petitions, the court has given an interim order regarding this issue. The High Court has noted that the State Election Commission does not have any powers to put off elections to panchayats. It noted that Constitution of India does not have any relevant provisions regarding power to postpone elections to panchayat, and even the Karnataka Gram Swaraj Panchayat Raj Act of 1993 do not have any relevant provisions regarding the same. To be very specific, the court mentioned according to Article 243K of Indian Constitution and according to Section 308 of the 1993 Act of Karnataka, the State Election Commission of Karnataka do not have any powers to postpone the general elections to the panchayats. And further, High Court evoked the Section 308 of the 1993 Act and mentioned that the elections to panchayats should be completed before the expiry of their tenure. The court also noted that the lockdown is being relaxed and the public places, malls are opened by the government. So it condemned that if the state can conduct SSLC exams, then what is the problem in conducting elections? So this is the background about the direction issued by the High Court of Karnataka to the State Election Commission of Karnataka. Now let us see the constitutional provisions related to Panchayat Raj elections, and we'll also see the legal provisions relating to Panchayat Raj elections in the state of Karnataka. With respect to Constitution, know that the Article 243K is related to the State Election Commission and its powers. Now, before discussing the provisions of this article, we need to know why there is a need for state election commissions. See, under the Constitution, the establishment of local self-government institutions is the responsibility of the states. But many state governments were not serious about empowering Panchayati Raj institutions, and the elections were not conducted regularly. So the Constitution was amended through the 73rd Amendment Act of 1992, which gave the powers to local rural bodies, that is the Panchayat Raj institutions. So these are the provisions under Article 243K, and under these provisions there shall be a state election commission consisting of a state election commissioner with the powers to conduct elections to Panchayat Raj institutions. And know that the state election commissioner is appointed by the governor, and his or her conditions of service and tenure shall be determined by the governor as per the provisions. But she or he can be removed from the office only in the manner and grounds prescribed for the removal of High Court judge. We even discussed this aspect when we discussed about the unceremonial removal of Andhra Pradesh State Election Commissioner on our 30th May Hindu News Analysis video. And next, if you see, according to clause 3 of this article, on the request of State Election Commission, the governor of the state should make the staff necessary to discharge the functions of the commission available to the commission. And the clause 4 mentions that the state legislature can make laws with respect to all matters relating to elections to the panchayats, but subject to the provisions of the constitution. So to implement the constitutional provisions, the Karnataka state legislature enacted the Karnataka Gram Swaraj and Panchayat Raj Act of 1993. And this act was enacted to conduct free and fair elections to the local bodies. And under this act, the section 308 provides the constitution of Karnataka State Election Commission. It provides for the mandate of SEC and the conditions of service and tenure of the state election commissioner, etc. So based on the constitutional provisions and the legal provisions, if you see, in the constitution also there is no provision which mentions that the state election commission has the power to postpone the elections to panchayat. And even the 1993 Act does not have the relevant provisions which provides power to the State Election Commission to postpone the elections to Panchayat. And based on these only, now the High Court has ordered or directed the State Election Commission to reconsider its decision regarding the Gram Panchayat elections. So that is all about this news article. In this discussion, we saw about the recent decision of High Court of Karnataka regarding the State Election Commission of Karnataka. And we saw the constitutional provisions relating to the elections to panchayats. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. The displayed practice question will be discussed in the last session. Moving on to the next discussion, which is based on this editorial. In the recent days, we have talked extensively about Indo-China relations and Indo-Nepal relations. And in this editorial, author explains why China is actively pursuing or claiming Indian territories along the border. The syllabus that is relevant to this discussion is given here for your reference. See, the main reason given by author for the active pursuance or claiming of China of the Indian territories is the concept of 5 fingers of Tibetan palm. See, according to China, Tibet is China's right palm, and its 5 fingers are Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and the Northeast Frontier Agency, that is NEFA or Arunachal Pradesh. See, as you know, Arunachal got its statehood in 1987, and before that, it was a union territory for 15 years since the year 1972. And the name Arunachal Pradesh was first given at that time only, and prior to that, it was known as the Northeast Frontier Agency, and it was under the direct administration of the Ministry of External Affairs of Government of India. So since China considers Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan and NEFA as the fingers of the palm, it assumes that it is China's responsibility to liberate these 5 fingers of the palm. But if you see, against the China's aspirations, these 5 fingers or the places have stayed more closely to India than to China. And in the recent years, India is actively building infrastructure along these areas which share border with China. And according to author, this is the reason why China is committing incursions very frequently so that it can renew its strategy of liberating the 5 fingers. To explain this clearly, author takes us back to 1950s. As you know, in 1954, India and China signed the Panchsheel Agreement. The Panchsheel Agreement is the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, which is given here for your reference. It was signed between India and China in 1954. But even after signing this agreement, and before the 1962 China-India war, author mentions that the then Nehru government had begun to worry about some of China's proclamations. It is because in 1959, after Dalai Lama arrived in India, China started demanding self-determination in Kashmir. China even ran different campaigns and even started depicting the 5 fingers as part of China in their school textbooks also. So this was the existing scenario between the 1962 India-China war. But as you know, India got defeated in this war. But still, India was able to effectively counter the China's 5-finger policy. And this is because of the 3-pronged foreign policy initiated by India. So what is this 3-pronged or 3-way strategy of India? The first one in this is the building of border infrastructure and governance along the border areas. For governance, in the mid of 1950s, the Indian government created the Indian Frontier Administrative Services, or in short IFAS. It was created for overseeing NEFA and other areas along the India-China frontier. This IFAS consisted of officers belonging to Indian Foreign Service, Indian Administrative Service, and the Indian Police Service. It also consisted of officers drawn from the armed forces, academics, and other services who volunteered to serve in the area. And the chosen officers rotated between postings in the most remote tribal areas and embassies in the region. So a special desk was created for these officers in the Ministry of External Affairs. The officers would tour all the regions from Nefa to Ladakh in order to make suggestions for the rapid development of these areas. But we see much news on India building its border infrastructure in the recent times only. And now only India is catching up with Chinese infrastructure, which was built by China on its side of LAC. But according to the author, the base for these infrastructure construction by India was made during the brief period when IFAS existed, because it was wound up in 1968. Some sources say this service was merged with the IAS, that is Indian Administrative Service, for a variety of reasons, such as the desire of its members to have a better career opportunities, etc. But it is said that the role of IFAS was transferred to the Indian Army and the Border Roads Organization. So even though IFAS existed for a short period, it created a base for the construction of infrastructure along the border by India. Now, based on this only, author is suggesting for creating another IFAS or resurrecting the IFAS. It is because there exists a notion that the frontier is being neglected and the center does not focus on this region. Even recently in 2019, the chief ministers of Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram suggested this same idea. So the first way used in the strategy of India was the building of border infrastructure and governance along the border areas through IFAS. Now the second one was the signing of series of treaties with neighboring countries who also happen to be part of China's Five Fingers policy. For example, in 1950, India signed a treaty with Sikkim, and that treaty made Sikkim a protectorate to India. And by the year 1975, Sikkim was given statehood and it became the 22nd state of India. Then in 1950, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was signed between the government of India and the government of Nepal. But even before that, in the year 1949 itself, the Treaty of Perpetual Peace and Friendship was signed between the government of India and the government of Bhutan. And each of these treaties built unique relationship between India, Nepal and Bhutan. But according to the author, these treaties have outlived their utility because the benefits of unique ties with Nepal and Bhutan that existed because of these treaties have lost in the public memory. See, the benefits included open borders and ease of movement, then job and education for the youths of Nepal and Bhutan. It also included India's influential support on the world stage, etc., etc. But since these treaties were signed way long ago, it is said that the utility of these treaties has been outlived. And this enabled China to enter Nepal, but it could not enter Bhutan. It is because the 1949 treaty with Bhutan was renegotiated and a new treaty was signed in 2007. It was the Indian-Bhutan Friendship Treaty of 2007. This ensured enhancing the healthy ties between India and Bhutan. But the 1950 treaty with Nepal has not been reviewed so far, and thus it has not been renegotiated on new political terms. It is said that India has also delayed the reviewing despite multiple requests from Nepal. So some argue that the treaty, which developed unique ties between India and Nepal, is now creating differences between both the countries. Now next, India's third way was towards the palm of China, that is Tibet. As you know, in 1959, India gave shelter to Dalai Lama and lakhs of his followers also. And Dalai Lama has the loyalty of Tibetans worldwide. But there exists a question that in the future, who will take up the political leadership of the community after Dalai Lama? So with respect to this, author mentions that China will try to force its own choice on the community. But India is also home to so many Tibetans. So according to the author, India must chart a more prominent role in the discussion regarding the political leadership of the community, which follows Dalai Lama. So these were the three-pronged strategy of India against China's declaration of liberating Five Fingers. So if India wants to retain its strategy against Five Fingers concept of China, then India must not lose sight of every finger while it confronts China. Because as you know, after the Jammu and Kashmir reorganization, China noted that India had undermined China's territorial sovereignty by unilaterally changing its domestic law. And even recently, our Home Minister has made a statement of taking back Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and China-occupied Aksai Chin back. And these instances were taken very seriously by China. It is because China's interest in Pakistan occupied Kashmir is not just with respect to its close relations with Pakistan, but it is also with respect to its $1 billion investment in the China Pakistan economic corridor, which runs through Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So, because of this only, author notes these instances have paved way for frequent incursions by China, as China is trying to change the status quo to its advantage. That is, it is trying to change the existing state of affairs to its advantage. Apart from this, another finger of Nepal is also building tensions with India. Even there exists a supposition that the move of Nepal with respect to the new map is backed by China. It means Nepal is worried about its border differences with India, and hence it is moving aggressively by claiming the disputed sites as its integral part, and supposedly with the backing of China. And additionally, there is also existing standoffs between India and China at different points along the LAC. If you note, all these tensions is related to the fingers of the five finger concept of China. And that is why author notes India must not lose sight of every finger while it confronts China. Because again, China is trying to renew its strategy of liberating the five fingers. So, as suggested by the author, by taking the example of the past of the three-pronged strategy, India can again effectively counter the policy of China of five fingers. So that is all about this discussion. In this discussion, we saw why China is actively pursuing or claiming India's territories along the border with India. And we saw the main reason of the concept of five fingers of Tibetan palm. And we also saw the three-pronged foreign policy initiated by India to counter this concept. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. The split practice question will be discussed in the last session. Now, this next discussion is based on this article which has appeared on the op-ed column. And this article talks about the maternal health. It talks about the suffering of pregnant women during the nationwide lockdown. See, there are several government schemes like Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana and Janani Suraksha Yojana, which aims at the welfare of pregnant women and lactating mothers. They promote institutional delivery by giving cash incentives to the pregnant women. But during lockdown, pregnant women who reached the hospitals were not taken care of. And the author of this article gives shocking examples of death of pregnant women in Noida and Telangana after they were turned away from a number of hospitals. This lack of mechanism or ill preparation of government to take care of one of the most vulnerable groups is equal to the government abdicating its responsibilities. So what is the reason for suffering of pregnant women in this pandemic? See, the frontline workers who usually assisted pregnant women are now doing community surveillance, they are monitoring, and they are building awareness for COVID-19 pandemic. Also, the public health system is overburdened due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as the most secondary and tertiary hospitals are designated as dedicated COVID-19 facilities. And according to the author of this article, pregnant women had to be recently tested negative for the COVID-19 for entering a general hospital. Now, this has further complicated the issue. Not just that, additionally, several private hospitals and clinics have already closed down due to the fear of infections. All these have led to the hospitals turning away pregnant women, which in turn has led to the death of pregnant women. See, if you see the India's maternal mortality ratio, it was 167 deaths per 1 lakh live births in the year 2011 to 2013. And now it has come down to 122 deaths in the year 2015 to 2017. And this happened because of the sustained efforts by the government and other stakeholders. But due to the lack of measures during the COVID-19 lockdown, we are losing the improvements made in these years. Hence, it is the right time for the policymakers to acknowledge the shortcomings of an overstretched and under-resourced health system in India. The pandemic most importantly underscored the need to spend more in the public health sector. We have already witnessed the struggles faced by the migrant laborers during the lockdown. So, all these indicates the need for a long-term management strategy while handling a disaster. So, these are the points that you have to take from this article. Now, based on this, we have framed this question. Now, if you look at the first statement of this question, it mentions maternal mortality rate is the number of maternal deaths per 1 lakh live births due to cases related to pregnancy, that is, death while pregnant or within 42 days of termination of pregnancy, regardless of the site or duration of pregnancy. Now, this statement is correct because this is the definition provided by World Health Organization for the maternal mortality rate. Now, the second statement mentions in 2020, India became the first Asian country to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal on maternal mortality rate. Now, this statement is incorrect because as per the latest estimate, India's MMR is 122 per 1 lakh live births in the year 2015 to 2017. But if you see under SDG 3, which is with respect to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages, the target 3.1 aims to reduce global MMR to less than 70 per 1 lakh live births by the year 2030. So we can see that India has a long way to go to achieve the SDG target. So that is why the statement is incorrect. And here the question asks for the correct statements. So the correct answer to this question is option A, 1 only. Now, this next discussion is based on this question, which has been framed based on this news article. The news article mentions about two national emergency funds. They are National Disaster Response Fund and then PM CARES. The news is that Supreme Court has asked the response from the government regarding a plea. The plea is to transfer the entire contributions made to the PM CARES Fund for fighting COVID-19 to the National Disaster Response Fund. So, in this scenario, know that PM CARES stands for Prime Minister's Citizen Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situations Fund. Government created this fund to accept donations during the COVID-19 crisis, and Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of this fund. Also know that the Union Minister of Defense, Union Minister of Home Affairs and Finance are ex officio trustees of this fund. And this fund consists entirely of voluntary contributions from individuals or organizations, and it does not get any budgetary support. Further, donations to this fund are exempted from the Income Tax Act, and the donations will also qualify to be counted as corporate social responsibility. So this was about the PM CARES Fund. Now the next is NDRF, that is National Disaster Response Fund. See, unlike PM CARES Fund, NDRF is constituted under Section 46 of Disaster Management Act of 2005. This act also provides for the constitution of State Disaster Response Fund. So that means the NDRF and SDRF have statutory backing, which the PM CARES does not have. And the disasters covered under this NDRF are cyclone, drought, earthquake, fire, flood, tsunami, hailstorm, pest attack, etc. etc. Now, this NDRF supplements SDRF of a state in case of a disaster of severe nature, provided that adequate funds are not available in SDRF. And know that the central government contributes 75% of SDRF allocation for general category of states or union territories, and central government contributes 90% for special category of states or union territories, that is the northeastern states, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir. And also know that NDRF is mainly funded from budgetary sources, but just now we saw that PM CARES Fund is strictly barred from getting funds from budget. So this is an important distinction between NDRF and PM CARES Fund. Now, if you look at this question, the first statement mentions PM CARES is constituted under Disaster Management Act of 2005. Now, this statement is incorrect because it has not been constituted under this act. It does not have any statutory backing. Now, the second statement mentions the National Calamity Contingency Fund is merged into NDRF. And this statement is correct because the National Calamity Contingency Fund or NCCF was merged into NDRF, and after that NCCF ceased to exist. Now, if you see, the question asks for the incorrect statement, and statement 2 is correct. So you can eliminate options B and D. Now, the third statement is both the funds consist entirely of public contributions and do not get any budgetary support. The statement is incorrect because we saw that NDRF gets budgetary support. So the correct answer to this question is option C, 1 and 3 only. Now let us discuss the other questions that were displayed during the news article discussion sessions. Now this question is with reference to 38th parallel north. The question asks, the 38th parallel north often seen in news is the latitude which roughly demarcates. 4 options are given: Israel and Palestine, USA and Canada, North Korea and South Korea, China and Hong Kong. And the correct answer is option C, North Korea and South Korea. During discussion we saw that after World War II, US and USSR agreed for a temporary division of Korea at the 38th parallel or the 38th degree north latitude. Now this next question is with reference to Constitution of India. The first statement mentions the State Election Commission is responsible for superintendence, direction and the conduct of all elections to the panchayats. See, after seeing this statement, immediately don't think that State Election Commission is also responsible for conduct of elections to the municipalities. So this statement is incorrect. Don't think like that because the statement is correct. as the question does not have the word exclusively or only. It does not mention that State Election Commission is responsible only for Panchayat elections. Rather, it is a simple statement which mentions Panchayat elections are conducted by State Election Commission. So that is why this statement is correct. And this is as per Article 243K of Indian Constitution. Now, the second statement mentions the State Election Commissioner is appointed by the President of India. Now, this statement is incorrect because according to the provisions of 243K, the State Election Commissioner is appointed by the Governor of the state. So here statement 2 is incorrect and the question asks for the correct statements. So the correct answer to this question is option A, 1 only. Now let us take one mains question. The question asks, for centuries, India's territorial integrity is threatened by its neighbors. Discuss. So for answering this question, you can talk about Pakistan, China, and even Nepal also in the recent scenario. You can mention about the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, then the recent standoffs along the line of actual control between India and China, and how China is strategically planning to acquire the disputed areas. Then you can mention about Nepal, as recently it has modified its political map, which depicts the disputed area between India and Nepal as a territory of Nepal. And for answering this question, you can mention the past standoffs between India and China, India and Pakistan also to enrich your answer. And write your answer and post it in the comment section. We will review it and appropriate suggestion will be provided in a reasonable time frame. With this, we have come to the end of today's Hindi News Analysis. If you like the video, don't forget to like, comment and share, and do subscribe to Shankar IAS Academy YouTube channel for more updates related to civil service examination preparation.